In 193 AD, the Romans besieged the city of Byzantium. The great Roman fleet was moored offshore, blockading the city and cutting off its supplies. Then one day, as if sailed by ghosts, the entire fleet moved towards the shore and closer to the enemy's territory. The sails were down and no one was rowing. What was happening? In 190 AD, the Roman Empire was at its peak. It occupied over 1.5 million square miles from the Atlantic to the deserts of Arabia. But it was a divided empire.
This is the time in the Roman Empire when there are a lot of power struggles and it's not clear who's going to have the upper hand.
Forces loyal to the emperor-in-waiting, Septimus Severus, had blockaded rebel troops in the city of Byzantium, on the site of Istanbul in modern-day Turkey.
The Byzantines hold out. They hold out for nearly 3 years. And they're absolutely terrible accounts of what conditions were like in the city as they were besieged. They talk about them wetting leather bags and chewing on them to try to stay alive, of using women's hair to weave, to make new clothes, to make ropes, drinking the most rank and foul water.
Inside the walls of Byzantium, 30,000 people faced starvation and death. They sought to break the blockade with an attack that would take the Romans completely by surprise. They intended to steal the ships that were holding them hostage. Source documents describe the bold plan.
Divers cut their anchors underwater, after which they drove the nails into the ship's bottom, and with cords attached thereto, and running from friendly territory, they would draw the vessel towards them. Hence, one might see the ships approaching shore by themselves, with no oarsmen nor wind to urge them forward.
The secret? The ships were stolen by underwater commandos, the ancient equivalent of today's Marines. The mission was highly dangerous. The warship was the most expensive and technologically advanced weapon system in the entire ancient world. The ships would have had round-the-clock security, comprised of vigilant lookouts. This would have been the ancient equivalent of the high security surrounding 21st century warships. The task of stealing the ships without being seen meant that the ancient commandos had to remain undetected for the whole time. One glimpse, and not only was the mission doomed, but the entire city would be conquered. But how did the ancient divers remain unobserved beneath the sea, hundreds of years before the invention of underwater breathing technology? The Byzantine divers must have accomplished the feat on a single breath of air. But how did they do it? At the Royal Lifeboat College on the south coast of England, Ancient Discoveries is investigating the techniques and training the Byzantine divers must have used for their underwater mission. Mark Harris is a British champion in a discipline known as freediving.
Freedivers are like the underwater special forces of the ancient world. Today we've got things like frogmen who use rebreathers, but in those days, of course, they didn't have that equipment. They just had the ability to hold their breath. The advantage of having a freediver unit within a navy would really be the invisibility factor of being able to swim distances underwater and not be seen from the surface.
A 6-foot section of a replica Roman hull has been rigged to a scaffold and lowered into a tank. Mark will test how long he can remain underwater on a single lungful of air. He will also assess how much work he can get done using only Byzantine underwater tools and a weight.
This device is called a scandilopetra and was used by the ancient freedivers to descend and provided them with the negative buoyancy that they needed to get there.
Mark will have to combine his freediving skills with those of a military frogman. He must cut loose the ship's anchor and attach a rope to the Roman hull.
I think my most challenging task actually is going to be trying to attach this plate onto the side of the hull.
The hulls of ships are built to be as smooth as possible to allow them to glide drag-free through the ocean. The ancient commandos would have had to attach a plate to the hull before even attempting to tie on the ropes.
I've got 4 nails to drive in, and I think that's going to be quite a tricky job to do. I think with the frogmen, the chances are that they knew that they were putting themselves in a very dangerous situation, and I think there would have been a very high mortality rate. In doing their tasks, they would certainly have been expending a lot of oxygen and had a very high chance of not making it back to the surface.
The test is a first. Mark briefs his safety and rescue team.
Can I have everyone's attention, please? There is a risk of me having a hypoxic blackout. Now, if that happens, what I need you to do is to get me to the surface as quickly as possible, grab me from underneath like so, and then secure my chin and hold the back of my neck, and then just bring me right up to the surface. If I'm not conscious within 30 seconds, then we'll ask this Dave here to get involved, and he'll know what to do at that stage.
Mark must first prepare his body for the dive with breathing exercises.
Really, when I'm breathing up, the main thing is that I'm just oxygenating my blood cells, I'm lowering my heart rate, and I'm getting something else called the mammalian dive reflex.
Mark is optimizing the amount of oxygenated red blood cells in his body. It's likely that the ancient divers of Byzantium may have conditioned their bodies in exactly the same way.
Blood that's in your arms and legs gets channeled into the core of your body, and also my spleen will start to release more blood cells as well, so I get a good circulation of blood going between my lungs, heart and brain, which is where it's all needed.
Mark's first task is to cut the rope holding the ship's anchor. After 30 seconds below, he's ready for his main challenge, attaching the plate that will hold the rope. To replicate the ancient diver's experience, Mark must continue the next stage using the same breath. Without exertion, Mark can hold his breath underwater for over 6 minutes. But physical effort generates carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, and this could reduce the time he can hold his breath by over half. He has now been underwater for 2.5 minutes, pushing his respiratory system to the limit and creating the risk of a shallow water blackout. By now, the ancient diver's lungs would have been extremely painful, yet they needed to continue work, as coming to the surface would have risked being spotted.
There are a lot of dangers associated with free diving, and the most significant is that of shallow water blackout, which occurs usually as the free diver is ascending to the surface. Now, on the way up, the lungs expand because as gases have less pressure exerted upon them, they occupy more space. Now, this has the effect of drawing out the remaining oxygen in the tissues into the lungs, and it is the loss of oxygen, or hypoxia, that causes the loss of consciousness. And there usually is no warning of this.
After 4.5 minutes underwater, the anchor cable is cut, the plate is in place, and Mark has successfully attached the rope. A dozen divers could have attached 12 ropes on a single undetected breath. This would have been enough for the men on shore to pull the ships towards the land. Mission accomplished.
Yes, that was definitely successful. I think it opened my eyes really to what the ancient frogmen would have been doing.
Amazingly, holding one's breath for 4.5 minutes while performing physical exercise is 4 times longer than the average person can hold their breath while sitting still. By using this ingenious method, the Byzantines captured a significant number of Roman warships. But even this could not save their city.
They had to leave the protective shelter of their city and seek food, and it was then that the Romans attacked and slaughtered them. The Romans captured the city and razed it to the ground. Byzantium was rebuilt by Rome, and it would again become the capital of the Roman Empire when Constantine converted to Christianity and its name got changed to Constantinople. And it still stands today as Istanbul, that city that sits on the brink between East and West.
In every era, special forces are called upon to fight in extreme situations. Andrew Lambert and Richard Windley are investigating a device that was made for another extreme terrain, the jungles of Southeast Asia. This specialist weapon saved an entire empire from total destruction. The jungle can be cramped and claustrophobic, There's no room to maneuver heavy infantry or large assault weapons through dense undergrowth and around massive tree trunks. Jungle warfare calls for stealth, silence, special weapons, and forces.
You need special training, you need special equipment, you need special experience to fight effectively in the jungle.
There is limited evidence from ancient Asia of a mysterious jungle superweapon, one that would allow special forces to operate in silence in the dense tropical undergrowth. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, the Khmer Empire ruled over great swathes of Southeast Asia. And its capital, Angkor, the largest city of the ancient world, covered 1,150 square miles, roughly the size of present-day Los Angeles. It was an ancient superpower. But in the 12th century, the Khmer Empire was nearly destroyed. A small rival kingdom, the Champa from present-day Vietnam, was growing in strength. Armed by the technologically advanced Chinese to the north, they marched into Khmer territory. A simple bow, as used on the back of their attack elephants, only had an effective range of 50 feet. But this was perfect when fired from a fast-moving elephant at a height of 15 feet. But jungle forces operating hundreds of years ago needed a weapon that could be carried and deployed in thick undergrowth, brought up silently into a firing position, and fired at a much greater range and with much more power than the simple bow. The ancient jungle elite forces' superweapon was the double crossbow. Ancient Discoveries is investigating how this weapon became the key to how two superpowers fought to dominate a 500-year-old world order. Leading model maker Richard Windley has reconstructed this ancient weapon.
So Richard, what we got here, it looks like two bows back to front.
The idea is we can get a much longer draw with shorter bows so that these things would be useful in confined spaces in jungle warfare.
On covert missions, the elite forces needed range to shoot at the enemy from a distance. To get range, they needed a more powerful bow. The way to make a bow more powerful is to make it bigger. But a bigger bow is too large and clumsy to deploy in jungle conditions. The answer was to double the power of the bow, not by doubling its length, but by its number, the double bow.
That's the one thing that seems to make sense with this. Even if you don't get any more power than with a longer, simpler bow, the sheer fact that you can maneuver it through the jungle is going to give you that critical advantage.
Well, that's right, and I think a sensible test would be to test one of the bows on its own, strung as a normal bow, and then set it up with a complete string in the double bow configuration, and then try it again and just compare ranges.
The range of the double bow should be greater than that of a single bow, although the double bow's design